Good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. We begin tonight in the Mideast, where Israel now has control of the skies over Tehran and is ahead of schedule, according to the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, who we spoke with yesterday. By now, the world is much more aware of how well-armed Iran was, with thousands of ballistic missiles and a nuclear program on the verge of threatening anyone who Ayatollah Khamenei didn't like. The supreme leader of Iran has ruled Iran since 1989, 36 long years of strict authoritarian control, systemic repression, and a threat to all humankind. Just one nuclear bomb on top of an Iranian ballistic missile fired at Tel Aviv or Jerusalem would have been game over. And Iran's next step was to launch a nuke at the United States. So there's no question Khamenei had to be stopped. Well, joining us tonight is the senior counselor to the president of the Heritage Foundation, James Carafano. Welcome back, sir.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
This war is far from over, though Israel has shut down much of the ballistic and nuclear threat. Today, Israel announced that it had also taken out the newly appointed Iranian military chief of staff as well. But there's a very deep nuclear site the Iranians have built, the Fordo nuclear facility. It's about 60 miles south of Tehran, but only the U.S. has the bunker-busting bombs that can go deep enough to knock it out. Does Fordo need to be taken out for the nuclear threat to be completely over?
Well, it depends. We have one of two possible outcomes here. One is the regime collapses. If the regime collapses, and in all likelihood, the government that replaces it will cooperate with the international community in removing the nuclear weapons programs from the country if they want to become a good citizen, get off of sanctions, get money for reconstruction, and all the rest. The other possibility is the regime survives. And then it's just another chapter. They won't, I don't think they're ever going to formally agree to eliminate their nuclear program. They may just go quiet and things will just die down and we'll move on. And then the question is how far back can you push them to make the likelihood of them developing a nuclear weapon more difficult? And we push them back away, taking out things like that. Now, everybody says, bunker busters, but honestly, we're almost kind of getting to the point where you could put people on the ground and go into these sites because the military can't be there to defend them because they all get killed. So they're going to run away, and you're not staying there, you're not occupying. So you could do an insertion, go in, put people on the ground, mess stuff up, and leave too. So Iran is a real problem in defending and securing these sites long term.
Well, Israel has been warning about Iran's nuclear program for many years. Members of our Congress have also made it clear that the world was running out of time and could no longer trust the Ayatollah. Listen to Senator Tom Cotton's comments.
Iran is rapidly producing ballistic missiles, both medium range to target Israel and short range to target our troops. And they add substantially to those stockpiles every single month. And at a time when Iran is both continuing its work on its nuclear program and trying to rebuild its offensive missile capacity, that the window to actually stop Iran from entering that zone of immunity was rapidly closing.
President Trump cut short his time at the G7 summit in Canada to return to the White House and his national security team. Do you think he's still open to negotiating some sort of deal with Iran, or is he preparing to take out that nuclear facility in Fordo?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I think it's just speculating because those are both, possible outcomes. Look, the only deal that the president would accept is that Iran would completely agree to remove all its nuclear capability, which includes not just the weapons production, but also the ability to process the uranium to make the material to fuel the nuclear bomb. And very likely the U.S. would also insist on ending support for surrogates and maybe even curbing ballistic missile programs. So it would be a pretty hefty ask. But the thing is the president can't make a deal. Only the Israelis can make a deal. And the question is I think their ask list will be as long, if not longer, than the President of the United States. Or it may be for the U.S. to either participate, assist, or consider further strikes. Or look, the U.S. could actually be saying, what do we do if the regime collapses? Well, they may not know if the regime is going to collapse, but if it does, are there things that we're going to have to do in the region? So that might also be something they're briefing the president about. I honestly don't know, because it could be, any one of those could be reasonable things to be on the table.
Well, it was back in 2016, the Obama administration released $1.7 billion to Iran, all cash, by the way. And then another $50 to $100 billion in frozen Iranian assets was released as well. I assume that this was instrumental in Iran's military buildup, including the thousands of missiles they're firing every day at Israel. Is that assumption reasonable?
So there are two kind of original sins that got us where we are. And ironically, they're the fault of the United States. One was the decision to enter a nuclear deal, which actually allowed Iran to reprocess. So the ability to reprocess uranium, enrich uranium, the technology is the same if you are making uranium to fuel a nuclear reactor or if you're making uranium for a bomb. It's just the level to which you enrich the uranium. So once you cross that threshold of allowing them to legally have that capability, you created the potential for a nuclear weapons program, because we knew that the Iranians already were doing all the other things, building the ballistic missiles, stealing the designs, having the scientists. The other original sin was we were going to entice the Iranians to behave by flooding them with cash. Obama did this and Biden did this. And of course, they took that cash and they used it to arm their surrogates to the teeth and to expand their missile and defense programs. So this day came a lot faster because of two people, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, there's no question. And the only thing I would disagree with Senator Cotton was, he said we were rapidly approaching. I think we actually passed that point 2 years ago. The Iranians have had the capacity to become a declared nuclear power with all the components of a nuclear weapon whenever they wanted to. It was a political decision, not a technical decision. And the reason why we are where we are today is they made one fatal flaw. To really deter somebody, you need what's called the offense-defense mix, not just the ability to punch them in the nose, but the ability to block them, right? Iran put all their money in offense. They put all their money in these ballistic missiles. They put all their money in the surrogates. Well, what happened? All the surrogates have been destroyed. So the people they could threaten with unleashing on Israel if they attacked Iran, they were all neutered. And if you just look at the numbers, I think it's pretty clear that we've already exhausted, that the Iranians have probably exhausted about half their ballistic missile arsenal, which means they've got less than 50% less, and they have a much diminished capacity to use them. And the Israelis have total capability now, freedom to intercept them. So we are way past the point that their ballistic missiles are a serious threat. So we have an Iran that is really virtually prostrate in front of Israel with really no way to really get back at them. They're in the worst situation possible. But again, we allowed them to get here because essentially Biden and Obama gave them the get out of jail free card. 98% of the misery in the Middle East that we've endured in the last decade is because we unleashed the Iranians on that region.
Well, James, we need to take a short break, but please stay for another segment. We'll be right back. We're back now with James Carafano, the senior counsel to the president on international engagement issues at the Heritage Foundation. While the war is still on, I'm wondering if the Iranian people have enough strength or organizational ability to overthrow the Ayatollah. The Israeli Prime Minister has spoken directly to the Iranian people. Listen to his comments.
The nation of Iran and the nation of Israel have been true friends since the days of Cyrus the Great. And the time has come for you to unite around your flag and your historic legacy by standing up for your freedom, from an evil and oppressive regime. It has never been weaker. This is your opportunity to stand up and let your voices be heard.
Is there any way to know if it would be safe for the Iranian people to take matters into their own hands?
Well, there's kind of two questions there. One is, if the Iranian people had a choice, they would throw these yahoos into the sea. I don't think anybody disputes that. I don't think the regime would argue with you over that. The question is how brittle is the regime? Because what keeps it together is the security infrastructure inside the country that the people really fear. And we've seen this over and over again through history. We don't know how brittle authoritarian regimes are until they collapse. And usually they collapse suddenly. And the reason is even the people that run the regime, they don't know how brittle it is, because the whole idea of authoritarianism is you keep such tight control over society that nobody really knows what's going on. So the two things to look for are, one, are there people in the streets who are unafraid? And two, what are the soldiers doing? If they're putting their guns down and walking away, then it's game over. So we've seen a lot of people leave the country. We've seen some demonstrations. We haven't seen a lot of repression from the military yet. We know they have a very fragile command structure, which has been deeply hurt. So there are some elements of that there, but whether we've reached a tipping point or not, I can't tell you. I don't think anybody can reliably. The people that would love to, I don't think they can tell you. The people in charge, I don't think they can tell you. Everybody's going to be surprised.
Well, with Syria under new rule and other countries in the Mideast talking about the desire for a greater peace, do you think the Trump administration might step in once the war with Iran settles down a bit and work on an expanded Abraham Accord?
Well, I mean, that's already in the administration's plan. I think regardless of whether the regime is toppled or just greatly weakened, the president's strategy for the region, which is the Abraham Accords, this idea of getting the countries in the region to work together on mutual security and economic, diplomatic, political cooperation, that's going to move forward. And I think it's going to accelerate after the conflict, regardless of how that conflict ends.
Well, do you think that the shutting down of the nuclear threat in Iran, a threat that had the capability of affecting much of the world, will do anything to shut down the Israel haters in our country?
No, because it's because it's not just fueled by the Iranians.
Right.
It's fueled by the Chinese. There could be Russian money there. We know there's money from George Soros. We know there's lots of people fueling this global hate of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So, and it's not just the Iranians. So I actually don't think that's going to stop unless we do the kinds of things Donald Trump, which is take down the infrastructure and the funding and the leadership that is putting the foot soldiers on the street. Then it'll collapse.
You've got a lot more experience than I do. What are you looking for next in this conflict?
I think look, we all know the Israelis are going to have a field day blowing stuff up. And the question is the question now is what happens to the regime? Does it settle down, retrench, tighten up, and then the war peters out, or does it collapse? That's what we're waiting for next. Every day the regime survives means it's more likely that it will continue to survive.
Well, James Carafano, thank you for your time today. We're all grateful for your wisdom.
Thanks for having me on. It's a great show. As you know, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. In a moment, I'll have some thoughts of my own about how to best move forward. Before the Islamic Revolution, Iran was a modern, thriving society. Its cities were vibrant. It was a hub of art, education, open commerce. Western alliances, including with Israel, brought economic opportunity and technological advancement to the people. The Islamic Revolution shattered that reality. Evil leaders replaced liberty with repression. They silenced dissent and turned Iran into a state sponsor of terror. Under the Ayatollahs, Iran became obsessed with Israel's destruction, repeatedly saying that as soon as they had the ability to do so, they would eliminate Israel and that they would attack the United States. They called us the great Satan and Israel the little Satan. Well, because of the determination of the mullahs of Iran to destroy Israel and the United States, the Iranian people have suffered greatly under a very harsh authoritarian government. I wonder, what would the people of Iran in the 1970s say today, knowing what Iran has turned into under this cruel and oppressive regime? Do they just assume that the Ayatollah would be a good steward of the people's trust and have their best interest at heart? Were they the proverbial frog in the kettle? I think in many ways Iran is a case study of what happens when good people stop being engaged. I'm concerned that here in America, we as Christ followers have been guilty of taking a step back from the public square. Too often the people of faith have been willing to retreat to quiet, private spiritual lives and disengage from public discourse. It makes us far more vulnerable. We will forfeit our freedom and liberty if we allow ourselves to be intimidated. There are some very practical outcomes of a diminished church. We've seen violent protests lately, anti-Semitic protests on our college campuses, anti-Semitic terror attacks in Washington, D.C. and Colorado. The legacy media's messaging regarding the Middle East seems to be consistently anti-Israel. They say Israel needs to make room to make peace with people who subscribe religiously to a violent ideology. Well, in this time of war and disinformation regarding Israel, as Israel is fighting for its survival, we as Christ followers cannot be silent. Like Esther, we have to speak up on behalf of the Jewish people. We share a heritage of faith. If we'll do that, I promise there's more reasons for hope than despair. I'll be back with your emails in just a moment. Stay with us. I want to personally thank you for spending a few minutes with us this evening, and just remind you, you can go to ajnow.com. There's an archive there of all the programs. If you miss one, you can see them. They're easy to share with a friend. In fact, invite your friends to watch. The more the merrier. Your emails are always a highlight. Bob in Tennessee said, after hearing about the many difficulties, mostly mental, that Joe Biden displayed, I've come to the conclusion that the Biden administration's 4 years were a warning from the living and true God to this nation. If this nation fails to heed the warning, then based on how God handled Israel many times in the Old Testament, judgment appears to be next. Do you agree? Well, Bob, I think good leaders are a blessing from the Lord, and I think bad leaders are an expression of God's judgment. So I suspect we've already seen some episodes of God's judgment. I think we have a little window of grace and mercy. If we will choose to honor the Lord, I think He will give us better leaders. If we don't, I think the future could be pretty grim. Brian H. in Chickamauga, Georgia says, I love the book Angels, Demons, and You. God's wisdom and truth is truly being spoken boldly by your willingness and obedience, a breath of fresh air in a stagnant world. God bless you in your ministry. Well, Brian, I hope it's God's word that brings a breath of fresh air, and it does that. Thanks for the encouragement. Claudia from Laguna Woods, California said, those judges that are opposed to keeping our country safe and trying to allow illegal immigrants into the U.S. should be taken off the bench. Well, I agree. Those leading us at every level of government should not encourage illegal activity. That certainly should be true in the judiciary. It should be true in our elected officials. Any activity that begins with the word illegal should not be encouraged. It's not compassion to encourage illegal behavior. And then Deborah emailed, it's been a while since I've watched your church program, but today was the first time that I've watched your news program. I'm so glad that Donald Trump is back in office. The United States has been in disarray, and he's doing his very best with the help of Vice President Vance and his cabinet to restore order. Well, Deborah, I'm very much appreciative for President Trump and his merry band of reformers. I believe they're doing their best to bring good work. I'm a little concerned you've been skipping church. We've been struggling with that since COVID all over the nation. Don't skip church. This little thing I'm doing here is just a side hustle. At the end of the day, it's about obedience to God and His Word that will bring liberty and freedom to all, not governments, politicians, or political parties. And it's time for God's people to recenter on the things that are most important. If we'll do that, I believe we have a hopeful future. Well, again, thank you for sharing a few minutes with us today. I'm Alan Jackson, and I pray you have a wonderful evening.